All right, folks, I am just getting connected. We'll see if the streams do the streaming. I think I have everything set up. I'm going to join my own event on LinkedIn because that's the one I trust the least. Seems like there's always something going wrong for LinkedIn. So give me one sec. Let me get connected on that. And as I'm doing that, if folks are joining in, if you don't mind, if you're in the chat and you're not shy, come say hi so I know the chat's working. I do appreciate it. I have shared stories before where I have done a live stream and my audio wasn't working for basically the whole thing. And someone was like, by the way, I don't think we can hear you. And I've also had times where people were talking in the chat asking questions and I couldn't see any of it. So those are not good times for anyone. So I do appreciate it if you let me know it's working. If you're on Substack, welcome. Sorry that you're down low because Substack doesn't support live streaming as a first class thing yet. But I have a topic for today, and this comes from Code Commute. So if you're not familiar, I've been trying to do a lot of my live streaming content on topics that I have a little bit more opportunity to kind of think through. And I do this by essentially in my second YouTube channel, which is called Code Commute. I kind of do like a vlog where I'm driving to and from work or to and from CrossFit. Or if I don't have much for commuting, then I join and vlog right from here. And the idea is that it's kind of like these live stream formats where I'm just kind of talking about topics, but the major difference is that it's not live, right? And this is. So those give me an opportunity to think through things, get some feedback and stuff. And then from there, I write a newsletter article. And then from there, I do the live stream on that. So I've had some time to kind of process this stuff. Oh, Tariq, sorry. Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you for rejoining here. I'm glad the advice helped. I don't have a donation link specifically, but I think if you're on YouTube and you have payment stuff hooked up, I've seen people do like a tip in the chat before. By all means, like I don't expect that. I'm just happy to help if that has been helpful. So makes me feel good if it was of assistance to you. So I would say if you're interested in that, I think tipping in chat, I've seen people do it, but otherwise, please don't feel pressured. I appreciate you letting me know that it was helpful. Aditya, what is the impact in the AI with the developer job? I think this question here is about like what is the impact of AI on developer jobs? So if you're, I'll give you an answer, but if you're curious to, I might as well kind of plug this stuff right at the beginning so that you folks have access to it. If you give me one moment, because I have too many windows open on my computer, of course. One sec here. I'm just going to give you a link so that you can check it out because I've made videos on this kind of stuff before, and it might be helpful for you to kind of poke through that. But if you check out this YouTube channel, you're on LinkedIn. That's not going to come through, but one sec. Let me actually say it in the LinkedIn chat. So there's Code Commute, and then my main channel is Dev Leader. I have answered these topics. Sorry. This LinkedIn is something special for sure. Failed to post the comment. I can't even comment on LinkedIn. So, okay, the other channel, I'll put it in the chat, and so it's Code Commute and Dev Leader. Those are my two YouTube channels. I've talked a lot recently about my perspective on AI and software development jobs. I'll kind of start by sharing this, especially in the past couple days. People are recirculating this funny graph that's like Indeed job postings for software engineers, and it shows like over the past 4 years, it's like this, absolute like curve up, and then it peaks, and then it just plummets down to like nothing. And it's like, from the top we're down like 70%, and it's like, hold on, man. This is like the most misleading graph ever. That's not to say that like the job market's not tough. Like it absolutely is. But it's like a very, in my opinion, it's a extremely misleading graph. So I need to be careful about the word choice here because I've been hearing people say that different social media platforms are completely annihilating impressions for content if you say a particular word. If you remember a few years ago, the entire world went into like a lockdown kind of situation, right? There was something happening across the whole planet. I don't know if folks remember that from a few years ago. You might recall that if you're watching other people on social media, they're having issues where they say this word and then their stuff gets no visibility. So I'm not going to say it, but if you were to look at the graph before that time, basically jobs had been increasing, job postings at least, because that's what this graph shows that people are recirculating, and they're increasing, and then there is this lockdown situation, like initial panic, and then the jobs like drop, like there's a dip, and this graph that people are showing starts at the little dip and then it shows it climbing up astronomically. You know what was happening during that time? There were a lot of people that were basically hiring software developers to scale up things that were in the cloud. Because all of a sudden we had the entire population of the planet working from home. What do you think was happening? Everything that was online had way more demand, right? So you have this curve that goes like complete. It's a absolute bubble. It climbs up, but this is a bubble. It's not going to continue this way, and then it starts to rapidly decline. So when you see this graph, I want you to think about this with a little bit more context because it's absolutely missing from the picture that's being shared. But with that said, yes, it is a difficult time, right? There are layoffs happening. You have, I've talked about this before, where the nature of remote work is very interesting in that I always give this like as a pretty stupid example, but I hope it sticks. If imagine I am a software company, right? And I live in Seattle and I'm like, I want to start hiring developers. Traditionally, what would happen is I would put up a job posting and I would say, hi, like you want, the senior software engineering job or whatever. And like location is in Seattle. So you would need to be willing to commute to where I am in Seattle, or you would need to be willing to relocate to Seattle. Right? Many job positions were like this. There were some that were always remote, but many were you got to show up. So that's going to limit who can apply, right? It doesn't make sense. Like for example, I'm not personally going to apply to a job that's in New York if I have to go there. Like it's not going to work unless my wife was really like, I really want to go to New York and that's what's going to happen, in which case my story changes. But that's not what's happening, so I would never do that. So it doesn't matter how many job postings are in New York. It doesn't affect me. But with remote work, if there were job postings in New York and they're remote, all of a sudden that opens up a ton of opportunity for me. And I think that overall this is a good thing. Like we have opportunities to be able to work remotely. I think this is overall very positive. But the side effect of this is that a job posting goes up. Now, you have so many people that can apply to this job because we don't have a location requirement if it's remote. So you have, instead of getting like 100 applicants to a job and that being a lot, hey, Danny, good to see you. Danny's a really big YouTuber and really big on social media. And he hosts really good events. And Danny once allowed me to speak at one of his events, and I flew from Seattle to Dallas and talked about C#, which is super cool. Danny's awesome. Thanks for being here, Danny. So yeah, I think we have this situation where there's so many people that can apply to jobs now. And then one of the side effects I see with that is that we have this situation where like You get like 2,000 applicants to a job, and then it feels basically like a lottery to get selected. So I think that what we're seeing right now is a decline from the peak when there was a ton of overhiring to scale up all of the cloud stuff, right? This is sort of a reaction to everyone working remotely. So I think we're seeing the decline of that. I think we have things like AI, we have things like people expecting that we're just going to replace all of the developers with AI, which I think is bullcrap. I do think that it will absolutely change the landscape of software development because it already is. And I've been hearing, interestingly, I've been hearing more people say this, that like every time we have a big technology shift like this, we see that it sort of opens up doors for more people to do this kind of thing. Like it actually creates more opportunity and not actually less. So I'm starting to see more of that show up, but I think there's still a ton of people that are totally afraid. But like I shared in the chat, there's a couple of YouTube channels you can check out there that I have videos on this stuff. Tayman, what's up? I don't know if you like, because it's like a public chat, I don't know if you want to go into the details of that. So I would, before saying anything more, recommend like sort of thought mindfulness around what gets typed next. Just a word of caution. I'm sorry to hear that. I actually thought that you were looking for work, and I didn't even realize that you were currently working. So that's actually a lot of news to me. But sorry to hear that. Aditya, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think I was on a bit of a tangent there. But I do think that AI is absolutely changing how software development looks. I don't think that it's replacing developers. I think by the time we have AI like literally replacing developers, we have AI literally replacing basically the workforce, which I don't know what that's going to look like, but I don't think that's anytime soon. I think it just will fundamentally change how we approach development. So that's my thought. Today's conversation, because there's a theme to all of these, is, and let me just kind of switch over to this so I can show you what I'm talking about. Hopefully this works. You're going to see my ugly face on this. So unfortunately, just because I'm going through a ton of burnout and I was on call, I did not get to actually writing this newsletter article, but I will put it into the chat if you want the link. I always give this disclaimer to people if you're new to my live streams. The newsletter topic, sorry, the live stream topic is generally based on my newsletter. Now, if you don't want to subscribe to a newsletter, please don't. I'm not trying to pressure you into that. Hey, Albert, on Substack. Good to see you. Sorry, your Substack stream is down here for me because Substack doesn't treat it as like a first-class streaming thing yet. Someday, maybe. So the newsletter is at weekly.devleader.ca. It goes out on Saturday mornings. It's essentially like you can read it like a blog article. There's a month before it's paywalled. So like literally there's no pressure to pay for anything. There's no pressure to sign up for anything. If you're like, hey, these live streams are fun, I like to show up to them. I like asking questions and being part of the conversation. If you want to know what's being discussed, weekly.devleader.ca, that will be generally the topic coming up for this Monday stream. So I do these every Monday, 7 p.m. Pacific. So that's my spiel. But this one, I unfortunately didn't write an article for. Just like absolutely burnt out, unfortunately. And being on call, I didn't have capacity to go write an article. But this is something, like I said, I did a video on Code Commute. This actually is a 360 video, which I thought was super cool. It's really interesting. I have the camera on the couch behind me. Actually, you can see it. It's back there. Actually, no, it's not. That's my vlogging camera. This is the 360 camera. It's got two of these bad boys on it. So, and if you're on Substack, it's down here. But I put that on the top of my car and I drive around. So this video that you see on my screen on YouTube, you can like literally like turn the camera and stuff like on YouTube and like look around. It's super cool. So I'll put that into the chat as well if you want to check that out. But this is sort of the, what's the word, like the catalyst, I guess, for this conversation. So basically what had happened was someone was asking about this scenario where they have their manager, and I think in their situation their manager was like new, and so they're saying, okay, like I have a new manager, and I think in general people already kind of have some challenges with this. So as I go to talk through this, let me know if this sounds familiar, right? If you're like, I know for promotion I need to make sure that I'm demonstrating impact, and when I'm working with my manager, having conversations about promotion, like I'm feeling like I'm ready or I'm really trying to get promoted, you might find that you're going through this like this phase of like, how do I bring visibility to that, the work I'm doing, to the impact I'm having, right? Like how do I navigate that? How do I trust that my manager actually knows what I'm doing? And sometimes people will kind of default into this like, well, okay, we have one-on-ones, so in order for my manager to know what I'm doing, I will have one-on-one conversations where I'm giving a status update, like, hey, I got this pull request up, I finished testing for this feature, and it's like very like granular kind of step by step of how we're progressing things through like the software development lifecycle. That will look different wherever you are. Hey, TR on YouTube, thanks for being here. So people kind of get into this mode, and don't get me wrong, like that's absolutely better than zero attempt at kind of conveying progress and stuff like that. And I always, like as an engineering manager, I always say like I want one-on-ones to be sort of the topics of one-on-ones. I want to be the focus of what people come to me with. I don't want to dictate how a one-on-one goes. However, I will try to steer things. If people only provide status updates, I will try to let them know, hey, by the way, like we have other sync meetings. I don't need, for me, I don't need like the granular details. If you want to share that, that's fine. But if I notice that people aren't coming with other things or wanting to talk about career stuff or ever bringing it up, or like talking about how engaged they are with work, I will try to like, kind of insert some of that, like, hey, by the way, like we should have a conversation about, progression towards next level, what that looks like. So not all managers will do this, and that's kind of why I'm bringing it up. So you may be in a situation where you're trying to figure out, how do I demonstrate impact to my manager? So there's a couple things here, right? One of them is, am I even having impact? Because that's something important to understand. And the second part is the visibility. And we're going to talk about both of those things. And it's probably easier to, in my opinion, to start with the impact part. We'll talk about visibility. And then the other thing I want to talk about too is like, it'll be maybe towards the end, is like this idea of when it's time for promotions, right? How does that actually look from a manager's perspective? Whoa, TR, thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's really awesome. By the way, like never an expectation for that, so thanks again. To start off, when we're talking about impact, because if you're not already having conversations with your manager about impact, that's the thing you need to be doing. You'll hear a lot of the time when I'm talking about career advancement, and like sort of like the best tip I can provide you in career advancement is like, if you are not having a conversation with your manager about aligning expectations for your career, you need to start doing that. Like it is a foundation of like everything I kind of talk about. And this is because I imagine myself as an engineering manager trying to do my job to help people in their career. If I weren't having conversations with people, it would be like chaos, right? They would show up at like rewards time or promotion time, and it would be like, hey, by the way, like it's either promo or not, and it's going to be like they're going to be surprised no matter what, more often than not probably let down. And there's a lot of things we can be doing in between to make that not happen. Dylan, good to see you. Thanks for being back. Harry, welcome back. Okay, one sec. I'm going into my chat. This is like the third week in a row now. I think what happens is I end up like telling myself mentally, I have okay, I'm pulling this up so that I don't lose it because for those of you that don't know, I keep telling Harry, this is like the third week, like, hey, I'm gonna get to your message. I am there, it's in another window and I can't lose it. So boom. Okay, I got it. Thanks, Harry. Good to see you back. Is it possible for an Android engineer to move to principal? I will try to talk about that. And I'm just checking on Instagram. Do you think some governments have a non-remote policy because it opens door to employees from other countries, or is it nonsense? I think that's absolutely possible. I couldn't tell you which countries or governments, but I think that's possible. Harry, I don't have to anymore. Okay. Let me know if there's an update. Message me on Instagram because I have the chat open. And like I said, I will follow up with whatever you put next. But to this person on Instagram, the non-remote policy, I think that's absolutely possible. I work at Microsoft. We have, I work with people in China. I was on a meeting today with people in China, even though it was a holiday for me, still dialed in for that. I work with people in Europe. So I could imagine that some companies maybe have that because of their government, but I couldn't tell you one because I just don't know. I simply don't, unfortunately. So is it in the realm of possibility? I think so, for sure. Okay. And I can't remember what I was saying. So, impact. So conversation with your manager in terms of aligning expectations, in terms of progressing, you want to make sure that you are set up with work that is demonstrating impact. Now, at more junior levels, this may not seem as relevant because a lot of the time, like if you are brand new, this is like sort of your first position, you just started in your career, what actually might happen is that they're just trying to see that you can get some momentum going. So the impact you're having, this isn't meant to sound minimizing, so I apologize, but the impact you're having is likely going to be small, but they want to start showing consistency. Like, yes, you can use the tooling. Yes, you can be effective. Yes, you're sort of starting to operate with a little bit of independence, right? Like, we got to get that ball rolling. We got to get the momentum building. So impact as a very junior developer might seem like, well, what impact am I actually having? As you become more and more senior, this will become more and more important because at some point you might be doing lots of work, but if it's not impactful to the business, you're going to find yourself in a situation where it's like, that's not actually moving you forward. So I think that's why it's extremely important to be talking about impact with your manager in terms of how it aligns with promotion expectations. The other part that I want to just touch on here, we got to slow down with the emojis on Kick, or the GIFs, the GIFs. I got to keep the chat so I can read it. Yeah, I think if you're in a position where you're working on things and you're like, I don't actually understand the impact or the importance of this, I always recommend to people on my team, like, let me know as soon as you feel that way because I can try to offer more context. Right? I don't want people to go working on stuff and being like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I was ordered to do it. I guess I have to. Like, no, we might have things we have to focus on. I gotta block that from the chat, unfortunately, because I can't read it. I don't want people to not understand the meaning or the importance or the significance of what they're doing, because I think that is really critical. So let me pause there. So we're talking about impact. I'm saying that out loud so I don't forget, because when I try to jump to other questions, sometimes I forget where I left off. So the one question, is it possible for an Android engineer to move to principal? How? This will, completely depend on where you're working, right? So I'm imagining if you're working at a company that has a lot of mobile development, I would hope that companies that you're working at have an ICs, like individual contributor career track that allows you to progress higher and higher this way. And so I don't know where you're working and what their sort of structure is. If they don't have it and you're saying, okay, well, I want to be able to progress as an individual contributor to senior and beyond, to like say staff, principal, or whatever other naming convention that people have, you need to understand the sort of the leveling structure of the different companies, right? My opinion is that, you know, regardless of the domain, companies will have, you know, senior and beyond positions for ICs, right? Not every company. Like I worked at a startup before Microsoft, and we, at the time, like I remember being part of introducing what senior was. We didn't have anything beyond that, like, because we were a growing company. We hadn't figured it out. So the short answer is yes, it's possible. How? Well, when we talk about career advancement, the reality is that, again, going back to impact, your requirement for impact will be going up and up as your level is going up and up. Your circle of influence will grow. So not only are you working on more impactful things, but you are involving others, right? The scale of who you're working with across teams, like organizational impact, that becomes an expectation beyond senior. So it might be like, hey, okay, for the product or service I'm working on, like I'm doing a big feature, and it might be, okay, I'm doing that and I'm collaborating with another team. But when we're starting to go beyond senior, which that's kind of like a senior expectation for me, you might be leading initiatives that are across other teams, not just the scope of your product or service. So it's kind of difficult to put into words without more concrete things depending on where you're working. So for me at Microsoft, I work in the Office 365 side of things. My team works in the routing plane for Office 365. So I could say, hey, I'm building with my, let me take the perspective of an engineer. I'm building a feature for our service, and it's going to help, I don't know, it's going to help these types of scenarios out, or I can improve some efficiency, whatever that might mean in some context. And that's good. But like, if it's not going to be sort of like a impact that other teams across the organization are going to feel, then that impact may not be great enough for principal. That becomes the expectation. And then it's not a one-time thing. Now the bar is set. You are expected to be doing this type of work. So it becomes very interesting because that bar keeps getting set higher and higher. So even for myself now at principal level, the expectation is not only that I'm doing impactful work that's part of the business priorities, there needs to be, and this is the other part that we'll be talking about today, there needs to be enough visibility across the other leaders in the organization. Like my impact needs to be great enough that those other leaders can see the impact of my work. Not like I'm messaging them on Teams and being like, hey, by the way, I'm doing this stuff. Like, now you know. No, like it needs to be visible in terms of that impact being significant enough. So the reality is, you know, to be able to go to principal level, and this definition will change at different companies, by the way, but at least from my experience, the level of impact needs to be significant enough across the organization. Random Quniverse. Sir, is it possible for me to become a full stack engineer? Since that, I see myself more like a front-end engineer with JavaScript and React.js. Sometimes kind of doubt myself to become full stack. Well, what's stopping you, right? And this might sound facetious, and I don't mean for it to sound this way, but genuinely, what's stopping you from, even while I'm talking on this live stream, what's stopping you from going and creating an app from the front end to the back end? Right? Like, is it that you don't know where to start? Is it you don't know what to build? Because these are different questions to answer, but like genuinely, what is stopping you? Now, if your question is more, can I get employed this way? I think we have to work backwards from that, because the next question would be, well, what experience do you have working full stack that you would expect someone that says, hey, like we're willing to take you on as a full stack developer? Now, for entry-level full stack, most people will be saying, well, I shouldn't have to have a lot of experience. It's entry-level. And I agree and I get it. But with so much competition, I would say if your goal is to become a full stack engineer in terms of employment, I would expect, because all of your competition will have this, some level of experience building things full stack. So the question back is, and it's a genuine question. Like I said, I'm not trying to tease you, put you down, be facetious, be sarcastic. What is stopping you from going to build something that's full stack? Because I'm saying that will be an expectation. Now we have to go kind of decompose that. I don't know which language to use, which tech to use, what to build. We can answer those questions, or you can answer those questions. And if you don't know how to answer those questions, you have lots of tools now that are AI based where you could say, hey, ChatGPT, I want to try building an application that's full stack. Here's what I have some experience with. Can you give me 5 different suggestions of very simple things to build? Right? And don't use it to tell you how to build it, like line by line, copy the code out. Ask it for ideas, get you set in that direction. But I think it's absolutely possible to do, right? Go spend some time building things. LinkedIn user, why does it do this? Tell me, LinkedIn, tell me who these people are. I'm refreshing LinkedIn on my computer so I can see. Melvis, what are the topics to discuss in one-on-one with your manager? So my framing for this is I always leave it open-ended for my directs to discuss with me. I think my recommendation, though, is that there's a mix of things, right? It doesn't always, like, I would recommend make sure you're having career conversations. But if you're having one-on-ones every week and then you go to your manager, okay, like, am I moving ahead in my career? Am I moving ahead in my career? Sometimes 1 week is not enough to measure anything meaningful. So you do need to kind of pivot things. But I have had one-on-ones with people where it's mostly casual. If it's a 30-minute one-on-one, I've had topics where someone's just telling me about some life event, right? And you might say, well, that's weird. Like, shouldn't it be work-related? Yep. And most of them absolutely are. But there are times periodically where we'll focus, like someone's telling me an exciting story about their life and they were happy or something going on. And for me, if people are willing to share things like this, that's good for building up trust and respect and that kind of thing. It's not an expectation I have of people. I'm not expecting people to tell me about their personal life by any means. But having opportunities like this where people can just talk to me and be open and have a conversation like humans can be really, really good for helping people understand, like, I am also a person, right? I am, just because I'm your manager doesn't mean that like I have some weird, superpowers or control over you or anything like that. I'm also just a person, right? Sometimes people will be going through something difficult and they'll be giving me an update and they're saying, hey, just like, heads up, here's what's going on. So there's some one-on-ones, the like much rarer are kind of like that. Most one-on-ones I find people like to talk about status updates most of the time. It's not my recommendation, but if people don't have anything else that's pressing and they don't feel like they need to dive into a career conversation, I have nothing wrong with the status update. I don't need it. That's not what I need from people. But if that's what makes them feel good to be able to talk about things, that's fine. Like, it's not a problem for me. Beyond that, career conversations are very important. So I would say if you are not having these conversations, find a way to bring it up with your manager. Part of that, like in addition to career conversations, and what I mean by that is like level setting expectations for what you should be doing to get to that next level. Beyond that is asking for feedback. And you can I recommend asking for specific feedback, because when you say, can you give me feedback on how I'm doing? You'll probably most likely get something like, you are doing good. Keep doing the good thing. Or if you're going through a challenging time, your manager might say like, hey, like things are still kind of the same. Like it's almost like you're getting a crappy answer. It's almost what you're expecting, which is kind of crap. So I would say ask for specific feedback. Say, hey, by the way, like you know, for this project I was working on, or in this meeting where I was presenting on stuff, how do you think I did? Or depending on the working relationship with your manager, hey, I had that code review up, or I did that design doc. Like, how did you think that was presented? Or how did you think that we navigated that? Like, do you have any specific feedback for me on what I could have done better in the design doc? So I think those are good opportunities. Something that I think people should do more is, and I don't know if people realize this, like as an engineering manager, like I got to deal with, like, I say deal, like it's a problem. One of my responsibilities, let me say it this way, is helping people with people challenges. So if you are having friction with a colleague or with a different team or whatever it happens to be, like, I am there to support you. I want to help guide you through things, right? I've literally helped two people on teams, and I won't go into details about it, but I've had people where they're both having challenges with the other person, and I have coached them both independently. So it kind of puts me in a weird spot, but I coach them independently, and then they come together and they hash things out between themselves. But they're using me as a sounding board, right? So, you know, I would say, in my opinion, the way to frame that is like, I see the role of an engineering manager as a support role. And how do you need support? Talk to your manager about that stuff. So that's my advice there. You guys got a lot of questions today. This is awesome. Muhammad says, oh, sorry, it's not Muhammad. Is it? Mohammed? I'm not sure if I am pronouncing that properly. I apologize. As an engineering manager, is it a must to be involved in coding? If yes, how many percent? This varies absolutely everywhere. My experience before Microsoft was I was what was called a technical manager at the last company. I would do, my time was split between coding, building features, and managing teams. I would say this is not a sustainable thing if you continue to grow your teams. So if you are continuing down an engineering manager path, generally that involves increasing your surface area of impact through people. And the more that you do that, the less time you have writing code. People can argue this all they want, and that's totally fine. You might have different experiences as an engineering manager. But I would say that people underestimate how much time people leadership needs. Heavily underestimate it. And if you are trying to put more and more time into coding, you are either working more and more hours, or you are taking more and more time away from your employees that need people leadership. And even really, really, really good engineers need people leadership. So when I answer this question, how much coding should an engineering manager do? It's extremely subjective based on the scenario. So I don't do any coding at work anymore for the last almost 5 years. Minimal coding. But I program in C# every single day. I was, my day off today, US holiday, I was coding Brand Ghost for most of the day. I was building stuff in ASP.NET Core the whole day. So I still code outside of work. I like remaining technical. That means that if my engineers need me to get technical with them, then I can have that conversation. My opinion on how technical an engineering manager needs to be is enough to be able to have meaningful conversations with the team. I have absolutely had leaders that were not technical that did amazing, because we could still have proper conversations and meet each other at the right level of technical depth, right? I could up level things to their understanding so they could get the impact of it or the challenges, and they could be open with me and be like, I don't get it, like explain it a different way, right? And we could work super well together. One of my best leaders I've ever had was like that, ever. You could be a super technical manager, right? Like there's all these different levels, but in terms of how much coding should an engineering manager do, this is going to be the same answer I give all the time. ask your manager what the expectations are, right? Because if I were doing my previous role and I didn't get clarity on the expectations and I just like stopped coding, my manager might be like, hi, what's going on? Because that would be an expectation. So it will be very, very specific to the sort of the employment opportunity. Brax, good to see you. I feel like the back end is so mystified for front end devs. It's really not that bad when you go out and build something. Yeah, sorry, I know I'm kind of going back in the chat, so apologize for that. I feel a similar way moving from full stack to an AI dev and built an AI phone agent this weekend. Awesome, that's cool. It was hard and fun. Great. Yeah, but this is exactly it, right? So when people are saying, is it possible? Like, can I do this? Like, is there, like, this is basically people are saying, this is a direction I would like to go. And they're almost asking for permission to do it. And there's literally nothing stopping you from, as far as I know, nothing stopping you from trying to go build these things or try out technology, right? Again, if the question is, how do I go from right now to being employed doing that? I would say your first step is go play around with the technology. And hopefully there's nothing stopping you from at least exploring. Chaggy says, I follow your advice and was more focused to improve myself, speaking English a lot and learning more deep in the documentation. Thanks a lot. Awesome. Glad to hear that. Thanks for being here. Brax has a question. I'm potentially moving into a role that doesn't... Sorry, chat just rolled. Moving into a role that doesn't have rigid deadlines. How do I gather proper expectations? I would say set them. Even if they're contrived or whatever, like set lines in the sand, right? This, I'm going to kind of share this from my experience, right? I think one thing I've noticed is that there are some projects that I've worked on over the past 5 years at Microsoft, just under 5 years. And some things absolutely have deadlines on them. Like I'm working on an extremely large project right now, cross team, and we got deadlines. And we got to meet them. And it's really important. But I've worked on other things where it's open-ended. It's like, we got to go build this and like, okay, like start building, right? Make sure you're asking for clarity as we're going. And the reality is like, what will happen if we don't set some type of line in the sand is that I might have this wrong. I think it's called Parkinson's law. Someone please in the chat correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think it's called Parkinson's law. But the idea is like we will take whatever time we set, we will fill that time trying to accomplish the work. Right. So kind of, contrived example here. If I said, hey, I need you to go build this UI feature. And you say, how long should I take on that? And I say 2 weeks. You will take the full 2 weeks to go build that. But if instead I said, we need that UI feature done today, you might go, holy shit, Nick, I don't know if that's possible. But I would say, well, what can you do in a day? And you would try to find a way to make that possible. You might have very different solutions in the end. You might have different quality. You might have different architecture. You might have a different look and feel. Like it would be completely different. But the reality is we will do work that fits the time allotment. So if you are in this position where you're saying there aren't really rigid deadlines, what I would recommend is try to communicate some deadline. So as an example, we'll use the same one I just said, right? So if Brax had come to me and said, hey, Nick, I'm working on this new feature. Like there isn't a deadline for it though. And then, Brax maybe would say, but I'm thinking that it might take me approximately 2 weeks to do. Like I feel pretty confident in 2 weeks. And then I would say, okay, that sounds good. What do you think that you would have done in 2 weeks? And then we would discuss the details of that a little bit more. And you might say, oh, well, the code would be done in 2 weeks. I would still need to have it reviewed and then we have to do some level of testing. Okay, so you think 2 weeks to get that part. And then how much more time do you think on top of that? Oh, well, maybe another week of like testing it with some of the other infrastructure or whatever. But basically by the third week, I would feel very confident it's all done and ready in production. Okay, cool. There was no deadline on it, but now we're saying We got a milestone that's at 2 weeks and another milestone at 3 weeks from now. Great. Now we start on that. And then what I would be wanting from Brax in this situation is that as we're progressing on that timeline, there was no deadline, right? We kind of just hashed out a bit of a plan. If Brax is deviating from that, I'm not going to say, oh, you promised me 2 weeks. No, too bad. Or it's, it's now the code is done and he's testing it and it's supposed to get to prod by that 3rd week. And I'm like, time's ticking, you better get it done. Like, that's not how I would approach that. It would be if Brax came to me and said, hey, by the way, we hit a bit of an obstacle and I think it's going to push us a couple days. I would just expect that he's telling me that stuff as soon as he has awareness of it. Because if there aren't rigid deadlines, if we started talking about some of them, maybe some other projects are going to start taking dependencies on this, right? I would want to go communicate that to other stakeholders and say, by the way, we're thinking this is going to be moved out. So I do recommend trying to set some type of deadline and then basically keep stakeholders up to date. I think that when you don't have deadlines, it can be very dependent on the person, but I would say for the majority of people, it's too easy to kind of like, I don't want to say coast, it's not the right word, but you're removing a ridiculously like valuable constraint. Because Brax might say, well, I want to go build the most perfect feature. There was no deadline. I'm going to take 6 months to do it. Right? The time constraint is a very valuable one for us to think about from an engineering perspective. What are we actually trying to get done here? So I do recommend leaning into that. I hope that helps, Brax. Let me know if you have any other questions on it, though. LinoXS or Linuxes, what are effective ways to tie feature development to business impact when leadership pushes for features based on intuition rather than metrics? My current company kind of heading that direction. Oh, never mind. You just answered. Okay, cool. Let me know if you have, if you want that clarified in a different way. Like I said, I'm kind of catching up on the chat, so I apologize. Harry says, yeah, definitely don't ask for feedback every week. Learn that in an internship. Nothing new came up, but keep up the good work. Yeah. So, and then you feel like, well, my manager sucks. Like, I'm not getting feedback. And it's like, yeah, because when you go week to week, it's like that amount of time to measure is like, it might be too small. And for some people, you might have hit a milestone, right? Between your one-on-ones, and you're like, hey, this would be a good opportunity to ask for feedback on this thing. So then get some specific feedback. So yeah, just don't, every one-on-one is not that opportunity. So, okay. Beanbag, welcome to the live stream. I think you were on Code Commute asking questions, I think. Wilden, how about CTO? I'm not sure what the question was in respect to. Oh, for coding? Depends on life cycle, in my opinion, life cycle of the company. So if you're a brand new company, like, yeah, I would expect the CTO's coding. I will share from my experience that when I was at a startup, it was around 7 people. When I started there, it was around or over 250 when I left there in the 8th year. If the CTO was coding, it was a problem. And I mean this with love, because both the CTO and the CEO, I've said this before, they will be people that I have in my life for forever, always, they change my life for forever, for the better. And the CTO, I mean, both of them, but the CTO, because we're talking about CTO here, his heart was always in the right place, always. And he was always like acting as a user proxy. Like he was, so we were doing digital forensics. So he was someone that had to use this type of tooling, had to literally go help with these types of crimes where we were using tools like this. That's why he started building it. And I really feel that like anytime he was like, this is something we have to go build, like it was almost always, from my perspective, like it wasn't going to be a miss. He was so in tune with what users needed. one of the challenges was that as a company was scaling and we were no longer just a small startup where, hey, it's a random Wednesday and we're trying to crank out features, but you need us to pivot for this other thing. No problem. We'll stay up till 5 in the morning building it because it's awesome and we're all just at a startup. At some point, it doesn't work that way. And it's because there's so many other parts to the business that are moving along. So no, we can't just go pivot completely because now we have other stakeholders. Like we can't just go ship this. There's got to be documentation. There needs to be marketing. There needs to be the salespeople updated. What about the trainers? Like there are so many other parts to the organization that get impacted from a new product. So sometimes what would happen is the CTO would be like, okay, I get it, but like, I think I can build it. Now, I will also say I mean this, I could say this to his face. If he were in the room with me, I would say, you are not the strongest developer. And he would say, I know. But he could absolutely build shit and he could make it work. You might say, I wouldn't have written the code like that. And he would say, I know, but it works, right? And so he would sometimes go build prototypes of things, right? And I would say, there was a point that was shortly after we started where it was like, please stop coding. Not because we hate your code or we think you have the worst code, but stop coding because that's not what we're expecting of you. And you're actually creating more friction or more overhead. If you need things built, you have an entire engineering organization to back you up. So if you find that you need to be going to build things, if that's what you find that you need to be going to do, I would say that you're not leveraging your engineering organization effectively. Fix that. You think this other prototype thing is the most important? Or you keep having these new ideas where prototypes are the most important? This is why we ended up spinning off a prototyping team. That was a team that I was about to start leading before I left. And my successor is the director of that team, or was. I'm not sure currently, but I believe is still the director of that team, which is awesome, right? Like we solved this sort of, or I want to say solved. I think that was the goal, is to kind of address this thing where we can avoid this. So that's my perspective on how much coding CTO should do. Early stages, for sure, I would say probably a lot of coding. My thoughts on Microsoft Studio. I don't even know what Microsoft Studio is. What's Microsoft Studio? Visual Studio? I'm just, or, because I think Microsoft Studio is like a building. So my apologies. Romeo Sweeney, I'm not sure if you were asking about Visual Studio. If it's Visual Studio, I love it. I'm going to be super biased though, because I'm a .NET developer. I've been programming in C# for since 2012? No, 2007. Yeah. I graduated in 2012. I started building in C# in 2007. However many years that is. Too many years. So I got to block this person. Get out of here. But yeah, if it's Visual Studio as a .NET developer, like that's what I use. Visual Studio Code, I'm not a huge fan of, only because I rely on Visual Studio so much. So Visual Studio Code feels like just a little bit unfamiliar to me. So I only use Visual Studio Code if I'm doing some front-end development, which if you watch my other YouTube channel, you would know I don't do a ton of front-end development because I don't like it. But yeah, that's my thoughts if you're talking about Visual Studio. Okay, so we've been talking about impact a lot. Maybe let's pivot a little bit, because I wanted to talk specifically about this situation that, and I'm trying to live stream for around an hour. If it goes a little over, that's fine. I think the other two I've done, last two were almost 2 hours, and I'm going to cut it a little bit shorter than that. One of the things that came up, just to switch back, because I see there's other viewers and stuff on here, we're talking about this. It's not a newsletter article because I didn't end up writing one this weekend, but this live stream is based on this video here, which is on Code Commute, which is my vlog channel. And basically what the person was asking was, when it comes to impact and visibility, talking about promotions and things like that, they were saying, I have a new manager. So they've been on a team, a new manager has come in, and they're going, how the heck am I supposed to be able to explain my impact when my manager is brand new to what we're doing? Which I think is a really interesting question. So, if you think about a scenario where your manager is kind of like the expert in the domain, they've been on the team for a long time, especially compared to you, let's say, they probably know what's up, right? Like they're in tune with like the business needs. They're in tune with what your team's responsibilities and charter has been. Like, again, they just know what's going on, or they should, because they've been in that position for a while. I just need some water, one sec. So what do you do if you have a new manager? So I found myself in this situation before, actually a couple of times in my career. Early on in my career, when I found myself in this situation, this is at the startup that I was at. So I worked at Magnet Forensics for 8 years. So when we had new management coming in over me, it is water. What do you mean? It's got flavor and caffeine powder in it, but it's water. Not lying about it. This isn't water. This is a 7-Up. Maybe 7-Up should sponsor my channel, please, so I can pay the editor. It's water, though. Early in my career, I think I was doing so much that it would be really difficult to kind of not see the impact because I was just everywhere. And I'm not recommending that as a strategy. That's just kind of what happened. Like I was working many, many, many hours. And then as a result, I was sort of reaching across different teams. So I was managing my team, and then I had built parts of the other like the code base for the other teams. So I was always kind of jumping around trying to help. And as a result of that, you would kind of just see me being everywhere. It was almost unavoidable. But that's not like I certainly can't do that at Microsoft. So like I'm not going to advise people, hey, if you have a new manager and you want to make sure that your impact is being visible, just go do everything. Like that's not it's not a strategy. So when I've experienced this at Microsoft, because the previous team I was on, when I got hired in at Microsoft, my manager switched to another team around a year after, maybe a little longer. I can't recall now. Maybe it was 2 years after or something. But anyway, he switched to another team. And that meant that I had a period where I didn't have a manager, like directly. My skip level was the person I started reporting to. And so, and for the record, my manager who switched teams, awesome guy, great manager. My skip level, awesome guy, great manager, great skip level manager. And, but I felt like during that period, I lost a lot of visibility, right? You might think like, okay, well, I've shortened, like there's one less person in between and I get a lot of visibility to my skip level manager. But I think the reality is, and again, I'm not, this is not me talking poorly about him. I think he's a great leader. I think in that situation, though, he's already overseeing so many things and he's trying to make sure that he can get a manager to fill back in. So I don't think that there was a lot of opportunity to be like, hey, Nick, like, let me talk about your career development, which is fine. I get it. Like it kind of, this is one of those things where I'm like, that sucks for me because I have this period of time where I don't get that kind of, feedback mechanism or working relationship with the manager. So that sucked. But I also completely understand why that would be the case. And I don't hold it against my skip because what I could have and should have done if I really cared was gone to my skip and tried making a case or brought visibility in everything I was doing a lot more intentionally. Fortunately, my skip level has a very good understanding of what that domain was. So it would not be the same challenge as the next part, which is when my skip level did hire in an engineering manager over me. Now, this new engineering manager that was brought in, I thought she was absolutely awesome. She asked a lot of really good questions right away, like trying to learn and understand the platform that we had. Pardon me. But the reality is, in the beginning, like anyone, you will not have the experience in the area. And that's literally expected, right? If you're brand new to something, especially at the scale we're at, it's just going to take you time to learn and understand those things. So this video that I was talking about, that I did a vlog on to answer someone's question, is really about, well, in this situation where your manager doesn't have the domain expertise, they are new, how do you navigate that? So what I was doing was making sure that I was not only bringing visibility to my own work, and in my case as a manager, what the team is doing, because that's another thing I should mention. Again, when it's a live stream, I don't know the exact audience, right? This is also recorded. I don't know who's watching this later. I realize most people that are watching this are going to be software engineers. I think my demographics show that it's more junior developers or aspiring developers, which is great. As an engineering manager, for me to demonstrate impact is different than individuals because I am not coding those features, right? It's kind of a funny situation where it's like, hey, like, here's what the projects I was part of. And it's like, okay, well, what lines did you code? And I'm like, I didn't code any of it. Okay, so what did you actually do? Okay, well, it just looks different when I have to explain impact. But what I was doing with my manager that was new was I would regularly try to make sure that she understood the areas that we were working on. And then the next part, which I think, in my opinion, is the most critical in this situation, is educating. But you need both together. So she, like I said, she was really good at asking lots of questions in the beginning, not afraid to be like, I don't know what this is, tell me about it. How does this part of the system work? What is our working relationship like with this other team? Like, what parts do they own and what do we own? So she did such a good job about trying to break down the system to understand like our responsibilities, our surface area, and our interaction. So absolutely applaud her for that because it felt like she ramped up quite quickly, which is great, right? This is awesome. So what I was trying to do was educate her on the parts that I had knowledge on, that I was responsible for, and how they tied back to existing business initiatives. So it's not just, hey, we're keeping busy doing this stuff. Here's my status update, right? Like, look, we're busy. It was, no, not only are we busy doing this stuff, but here is why that's important to the business. So as an example, the team that I was responsible for had a charter for reducing sort of machine time that's being wasted. It's like an efficiency kind of thing. So there's not only efficiency in terms of just like, if a computer is not doing valuable work, then it's inefficient, but also from the perspective of agility. We need things to go faster, right? So the efficiency improves our ability to be agile in these processes. So that's my team's charter. So I would need to explain to her, here's why these things have an impact, right? Here's this work stream we're doing. Here's the effect of it, but that's important to the business because that's going to save us millions of dollars, right? So the important part to abstract from this in this conversation is like, number one, I think it's important to help educate your new manager. If you are brand new, it can be very challenging, right? If you're also a junior developer and your manager's new, you might be like, I don't even know what I'm doing. How am I supposed to educate my manager? In which case, purely bringing visibility about your work, I think, is important. But if you're someone who is more senior and does have experience, you might be junior, but you have some of the domain expertise from being on the team for a little bit. Being able to educate your manager as they're onboarding, I think, is helpful. So that's part one. Part two is how you're communicating this stuff. This is why, if you watch some of my other content or read some of my other content, you'll hear me talking about soft skills a ton. And this is a great opportunity to remind people soft skills for software engineers are incredibly important. If you think about some of the questions that were already asked in chat, I'm going to scroll back up, just do a little mini inventory on this stuff, right? Impact of AI with developer jobs. Let me keep going. Android engineer to move to principal. Full stack engineer. We did have some that were like topics to discuss on one-on-ones. We had one that was how much should an engineering manager be coding? We talked about approaching projects and stuff. We talked about deadlines. Okay, so there's a couple that were not just coding, which I think is good. Did I? Oh, no, we talked about that one briefly. Okay, so point is, I think a lot of the time we spend as software developers talking about technical things. And I get it because it's a technical role, but I think we often overlook the importance of soft skills. So in this context, what I'm trying to remind folks of is that in this context for being able to help educate my new manager, right, as she's onboarding, I need her to get up to speed so she can be effective in her role because that's going to help me. She can support me effectively. She can also try to support me in my career growth effectively. I'll touch on this in just a moment, but the soft skills involved there are up-leveling context, right? I mentioned that one of the things that I focused on as an engineering manager is I try to remain technical so that I can work more closely with my engineers, really understand what's going on. Then from there, I take my level of understanding and I don't expect my manager to go that deep. They're managing me and other teams. At some point, it becomes infeasible for everyone to just keep the whole code base in their head, right? And manage people. It doesn't really work that well. It's possible, but it's rare. So I need to up-level what I'm saying so that my manager can get the best value out of that. She doesn't need to understand the code. She needs to understand the parts of the system and how they're tying to the business objectives. That requires soft skills and communication, right? I need to understand my audience and communicate these things effectively. If you are not thinking about your soft skills as you are trying to advance as a software engineer, this is a missed opportunity. You may find that as you're progressing as a software engineer, if you're neglecting these types of things, like not being sort of conscious that this is important to do, you may find that you reach a point where you're going from mid-level to senior, let's say, and you're like, why does this feel like it's challenging? Right? It could be many reasons, but sometimes I find that people aren't realizing that their soft skills, their ability to collaborate with other people, like these start to be the things that are holding them back. So I just wanted to mention, don't neglect these things. Now, what I was just mentioning there in my little spiel was about trying to help my manager, my new manager, get to a point where she understands what's going on so she can support me and then she can help me, advance in my career as well. Because one of the roles as a manager should be to help their employees do their best work possible and grow in their career. It's really difficult for me to expect my manager to help me grow in my career if they're still trying to figure out the impact I'm having, if they don't understand it. And I say that as a manager, right? That's why when I'm new to a team, I need to ramp up as fast as possible so I can, take that responsibility for my team. So the reason that this is even more important, the more senior you are, is because, and I said I was going to touch on this earlier in the stream, at some point, it's not just your manager that's putting you up for promotion. I mean, they do that. They're the ones that have to do it, but they don't have the final say at some point. This usually, it's going to be different everywhere, but from how I've seen this work, the more seniority you have, the higher your level, your manager still puts you up for promotion, but there's going to be other people involved in that decision-making process. So could you imagine, my manager knows if she wants to put me up for promotion, she knows that there are going to be other people that are part of that decision making. The other people aren't going to put me up for promotion. She has to do it. But the other people will be part of that conversation. Could you imagine if I was saying to my manager, I think I'm ready. You know, I've done really valuable work. And if she doesn't understand the impact, how the heck would I expect her to feel confident having a conversation with her peers or people that are above her peers that are going to try and sign off on my promotion? She's not going to feel comfortable doing that. So again, this is why it's really important to be educating if they're new, as well as trying to make sure that you are explaining your impact. And we have to up-level that message. So that's mostly it, because the visibility topic that I said I wanted to mention is essentially baked into that. So at this point in the stream is where I sign off and do my terrible sales pitches. But with that said, if folks have other questions as I'm doing that, this is the perfect time to drop them in the chat. So please go ahead and do that. I will start by jumping over to this view. So this is where I was saying, if you want to check out the newsletters, right? The newsletters are generally the topics for these live streams. So if you enjoyed this and you want to come back next week or in the future the same time, if you want to know what the topic is, it's generally what's going to be the most recent newsletter. I'll put it back into the chat. I said this at the beginning. If you're like, Nick, I think newsletters are dumb, I don't want you to email me, that's totally cool. You don't have to subscribe. You can check it out if you go to the website. You can just check out the article and see if it's interesting to you. And that way you can join the live stream and know what's up. So that's the newsletter. There is still time for this, which is a bunch of courses. It's a bundle of them. They're literally free. I'm not selling you anything. This expires at the end of the month, so I'll put this into the chat as well. So there's 2 courses here for learning C#. I've been, like I said earlier in the stream, I've been programming in C# since 2007 and been trying to help other people learn C# along the way. If you don't know who Nick Chapsis is, he is one of the biggest YouTubers for C# developers. So I was fortunate enough to be able to do the Getting Started and Deep Dive courses for his platform, which is super cool. And for February, they're free for life. So check them out. It's 11.5 hours. This first one teaches you, even if you have 0 programming experience, this first one will kind of start you off from scratch. So I recommend it. I might be a little bit biased, but it's literally free. There's no strings attached to it. It's not like, hey, it's free, but we're going to charge you money sneakily. No, it's free. Go watch it. Would love for you to learn C# for free. And then otherwise, I have 2 YouTube channels. Depending on how you got here, you might know some of them. Dev Leader is my main channel. It's been put in the chat. I will drop it in again. Dev Leader is the channel where I have mostly C# programming tutorials. They are fully edited, so you don't have me rambling like this. But there's a podcast on here where I interview other software developers. If you are someone who's maybe not taking a traditional path in the terms of like going to college or university, I've interviewed plenty of people who've taken many different paths, which is super cool. You'll hear different experiences. This looks like it's out of date. Why does it say this live stream is coming up? There we go. That's way better. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that I've started doing resume reviews on this channel. I have a little bit of a backlog to get through. If you check out the resume review videos, they will tell you how to submit a resume if you want yours reviewed, and I will add it to the queue. There is no fee. If this starts to create an enormous backlog, I will eventually move the resume reviews to members only on YouTube. For now, it's not like that, so take advantage of it if you want your resume reviewed. And then the other thing that I'll mention is that Code Commute is the other YouTube channel. I know some people are here from Code Commute, so thanks for joining. Code Commute is my vlog channel. Usually you can see like I'm in the same spot, but these ones are only when I'm not doing a bunch of commuting. If we scroll down a little bit lower, when I'm going to the office and to CrossFit, which is most of the other videos up until the past couple weeks, like these ones, it's I basically do something like this without the chat. It's not a live stream, but I vlog and I talk about software engineering topics. So if you have questions that you want answered, there's people that have joined this live stream that have asked questions. They've either sent them in to me. So again, depending on how you got here, look for Dev Leader on social media, send me a message, and I will try to make a video about your topic. If you send me a message, I'll keep it anonymous. If you comment on the YouTube channel, it's already public, so I'm not hiding you if you comment. But yeah, I make these vlog entries and try to help people. And then otherwise, depending on how diverse the audience is, Brand Ghost is the SaaS that I am building on the side. And so if you are coming to this live stream from my social media, everything that you see that's posted on social media is posted through Brand Ghost. For Substack people, this is important for you because if you're on Substack and you're an author or you want to be an author, you want to create content on social media, Brand Ghost is 100% free to schedule and cross-post. If you're on Instagram right now, I apologize because you get a vertical video. And if you're on Substack, you can't see anything I'm sharing, but it's brandghost.ai. It's 100% free to cross-post and schedule. The paid-for features essentially allow me to have recurring content. So like I said, if you're seeing any content that I have on social media, I don't post it directly to social media. I post it through Brand Ghost, and then it goes out across all these platforms automatically for me. My one anecdote that I love to share is that I took a vacation with my wife to Hawaii in October of last year, something like that. And I had Brand Ghost do 150 plus social media posts for me across platforms in that week. I did nothing. That content is all content that I've created ahead of time. So I wrote it, it's me, but I didn't have to schedule a single post. I just created the content, and Brand Ghost, and this is in the paid for feature list, Brand Ghost automatically will go schedule that out for me. So this is how I am able to create the content that I create without burning out from content creation. I'm now able to do over 10 YouTube videos a week. I'm still not writing blog articles right now because I'm spending that time coding Brand Ghost. But I can maintain my full-time job. I can build Brand Ghost after hours and still create content because Brand Ghost posts the content for me. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can do so right here with this link. Like I said, boom, it'd be free if you want to do cross-posting and scheduling. But I don't see any other questions in the chat, folks, so I wanted to say thanks for being here. The best way to have an idea of what could be discussed, I got too many people advertising on some of these these platforms. If you have if you want to see what's going to be potentially discussed, Code Commute is sort of where the inspiration is coming from. And like I said, if you have questions that you want answered on that channel, leave a comment on the YouTube videos on Code Commute, and I will try to answer them. Thanks for being here, and I hope to see you next Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific, so that's the same time. Until then, take care.